discussion. If we want to go next slide, amplifying lived experience and policy, promising strategies across the United States. One thing I've just been really thrilled as we've been listening, and I've been here today, is I think we all know that if we're going to solve homelessness, we need to adopt policies that address the issues that are pushing people to homeless in the first place and helping make it possible for people to stabilize and be healthy, safe, and housed. But as we find out, we know that it's important. We must find a way to make sure that those efforts are informed by, centered on, and led by people with lived experience. And so I'm really thrilled here today because we have a great panel. Unfortunately, Helen wasn't able to join us, but two of the great panelists here who are on the front lines doing this work and leading with their lived experience. And in a minute, I'm going to introduce our co-moderator, Dr. DeBorah Gilbert-White with National Coalition for Homelessness, National Coalition for the Homeless, and our two panelists. But before we do that, we have a special video message from a leader in Congress, Representative Cori Bush from Missouri, who wanted to share some words with her, as we all know, has been leading, whose efforts to address homelessness have been really centered on her own lived experience.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the National Coalition for the Homeless for hosting this important discussion and for all of the work that you do to support our unhoused communities and housing justice efforts nationwide. Thank you to the legislators in attendance who are working tirelessly to create a more just and equitable world. And thank you to all the attendees here to discuss how together we can push forward the transformative change that regular, everyday people can feel. As a formerly unhoused person, my advocacy work for unhoused communities is deeply personal and political. I know what it's like to be evicted. I know what it's like to live out of my car with my 2 babies. I know what it's like to endure the trauma of policy violence. That's what the unhoused crisis is. Policy violence. It's policy violence that leaves people and their children without shelter, that evicts our elders, veterans, and families, and that upends lives. So look, I faced eviction 3 times. The first time I was evicted due to a domestic violence incident. When I became a member of Congress, one of my first actions was an amendment to the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, protecting and providing emergency housing for survivors of domestic abuse. I became the legislator I so desperately needed. Another time I was evicted, not because I couldn't pay my rent, but because I was a Ferguson activist and the management company didn't want me as a tenant on their property. I was at the mercy of unscrupulous landlords, and they couldn't silence me, but instead I was activated to fight for my community and to go to Congress to change the system and represent the people of St. Louis. As a legislator, I understand many of the issues my constituents are facing because I have lived through many of those same struggles that they face. I vow to take my experiences and my community to Congress to fight for policy solutions from my own lived experiences and those of the people I proudly represent. This commitment is evident in our fight for affordable and fair housing policies. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the CDC implemented a life-saving federal eviction moratorium, and I said life-saving. So when Congress adjourned for a 6-week recess, as the eviction moratorium was expiring, I refused to go home. I spent 4 nights and 5 days leading a direct action on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, negotiating with the White House, the Biden administration officials, and congressional leadership, and forcing them to face the impact that this expiration would have on 11 million real people, 11 million real people and families across our country. On the 5th day, we prevailed. President Biden reinstated its federal eviction moratorium. We, together, saved lives. However, this victory was just a step. The expiration of the moratorium in August 2021 demonstrated the urgent need for comprehensive solutions to housing insecurity and rising rents. That's why, as co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Homelessness, I reintroduced the Unhoused Bill of Rights, which establishes fundamental rights for unhoused individuals and provides a roadmap to end the crisis by 2027. Being able to afford a safe place to live is a human right. Now more than ever, we must work to pass my Unhoused Bill of Rights to protect our vulnerable homeless populations from the Supreme Court's inhumane Grants Pass v. Johnson decision, which we all know steamrolled the civil and constitutional rights of unhoused people by allowing cities to fine, to ticket, to jail people for sleeping outside, even in cases where there is nowhere else for them to go. Punishing our most vulnerable and marginalized communities for our government's failure to house its own people is unconscionable. We cannot allow this extremist MAGA court to get away with such vile acts of inhumanity. We must stop the unconstitutional criminalization of unhoused people and invest in real solutions to ending homelessness. I have no doubt in my mind that together we can end the unhoused crisis. Just think, if Congress can spend nearly $1 trillion on an absurdly inflated defense budget, we can certainly invest in people's well-being and wraparound services that provide medical care, nutrition programs, and mental health services to help people recover from the trauma of being unhoused. We need more policymakers in elected office with the political will to do it. Thank you again to all of you at the National Coalition for the Homeless for your unwavering leadership, for your invaluable partnership, and for your steadfast commitment to housing justice for all. I absolutely look forward to seeing how the people at this very conference will change the landscape of housing equity and create policies to end the unhoused crisis for good. And always remember that this formerly unhoused Congresswoman loves you.
Again, good afternoon. My name is DeBorah Gilbert White, and I serve as the Director of Education with the National Coalition for the Homeless in Washington, D.C. We're also coordinating the Faces of Homelessness Speakers View. I began my journey on legislation and policy work connected to housing and homelessness in 2012 when I exited a shelter in Wilmington, Delaware, and I asked the question, is there a homeless bill of rights for the state of Delaware? And so that journey continues as we work to get that passed. Hopefully it will happen in the coming year, but we will continue to do that work. I am honored this afternoon to take the opportunity to introduce our panelists for today. We have two amazing people who are out in community working on policy in their respective and communities across the country. The first person is Cecilia Gerlach, who we call Cece Gerlach, and I'd like to read a short bio for Cece. Cece Gerlach grew up in the Maryland, D.C., and West Virginia areas. She moved to Pennsylvania to attend Cedar Crest College. Cece became homeless after college while she was volunteering on various political campaigns and working at an after-school program. She decided to run for school board after seeing the lack of resources and support for the students that she worked with, and served 8 years on the board, including 2 years as vice president. Cece became the first Black woman to be elected to Allentown City Council in 2019, and she was re-elected in 2023. She is an unapologetic, bold, progressive, fighting for transformative change in Allentown and throughout Pennsylvania. Cece has introduced affordable housing and policy reform policies. She recently passed legislation that decriminalizes being homeless. She is a community organizer and advocate for criminal justice reform. Cece is now a first-time homeowner in Center City, Allentown, with her 4 cats and a dog. Welcome, Cece. Next, my little brother. Branden Fletcher Dominguez is a dedicated community organizer, housing advocate, and campaign strategist. He plays a key role as a core team member with the Homes Campaign in Wilmington, Delaware, a volunteer advocacy organization focused on advancing housing justice policies. Branden has helped launch issue campaigns, including the fight for renters' right to equal representation. With a background in AmeriCorps, Public Allies, and lived experience with housing insecurity, he is committed to building more equitable communities through advocacy and policy change. Please welcome Branden.
All right, I get the pleasure of asking our first question. And after hearing those bios that we've gotten to talk a little bit, both of you have been involved in some really impressive policy. So I'm hoping you can start off, we'll start with Branden on this one, describing one of those policy campaigns you've been on that you're particularly proud of. And besides describing what happened with it, tell us how either your lived experience or the lived experience of some of your coalition partners really helped inform that effort.
Yeah, so one of the policy fights that I played a key role in was the right to legal representation for tenants facing eviction. We have an issue in Delaware. We're a small state, and it's called the Delaware Way, where you can get a small group of people together to address the issues facing people in our communities. But often what happens is that people who are most impacted aren't at those tables. And many of the ideas and solutions that are brought out aren't actually what the people in communities are calling for and asking. And so we had a situation where the initial legislation was tainted and watered down by developers, the apartment association, corporations who'd rather see housing as a commodity versus a right for everyone. And so what I decided to do was organize tenants in my community, in my neighborhood, in my building to get involved in knowing what our rights and responsibilities are and starting to show up to Legislative Hall and advocating for policy changes like renters' rights representation. And so that's the work that we continue to do with the Homes Campaign, is show up in community with folks and try to mobilize people in their communities to get involved in these fights.
Great, and maybe just a follow-up, because you mentioned right there the key to that was how you were mobilizing people who were going through it. Tell us how that really, how were that brought by having involving people who were facing eviction, facing these huge rent burdens?
It shifts the conversation, and so we still have a lot of work to do, because this year I worked with Dr. DeBorah on the Homeless Bill of Rights, and we did the work of getting homeless people to show up to Legislative Hall, which is a really big win, and it takes a lot of time to get people involved, but we were met with elected officials who only allowed developers and realtors to speak on the legislation during public comment, and then what they said was that the solution to homelessness is to hose homeless people away, criminalize and lock up homeless people. And so, we're able to mobilize people, we're able to get people to show up, but we're often met with strong forces that control our political system and don't want to hear from the voices of people who are impacted.
Thanks, Branden. Cece, I know we were talking earlier, right? That's the forces you see every day in your role as a council member. Tell us about a campaign you've had and how your lived experience and those forces really helped to try to push something forward.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was unhoused, as many of you maybe have experienced, you get pushed around from this place to that place. I lived in my car, and so I would park on one street or in a parking lot, and next thing I know, a cop's coming up and you gotta move along, or some Karen is looking outside her window and seeing that I've been sitting there or sleeping there for a couple hours, so she'll come out and say something, or the cops will come, or whatever. Even like, I remember going to the mall, and it was cold. I'm talking like cold, where if you were to go outside with even a cold, you're gonna get frostbite. I was at the mall, it was at Christmas time, and I figured, okay, if I go in and I go into these different stores, JCPenney's and Macy's, I got these empty bags, I'll just fill them up with my stuff, and people would just think like I was shopping till I dropped. And I was sitting on the bench, and I took a little nap, I wake up, I'm surrounded what felt like an entire room of security, probably only 2 dudes, but felt like an entire room was like looking at me and telling me, I couldn't be there, and have to call the police and blah, blah, blah. So I just jetted. And so it's those experiences. Once I got on city council, I said, I gotta do something about this. So my first thing wasn't the homeless bill of rights. My first thing was to get a line item in the budget. We've never had a line item to address homelessness. So I got $100,000, not a lot, but it's a line item that can be built upon in future years. And then we were able to get a coordinator of homeless services for the city in the budget, and it's still there throughout all the different budgets for the last 5 years. But then with the Supreme Court situation, before the ruling came out, I reflected back on my experience and what it was like, and then, just still being friends, because yeah, I'm on council, but I don't really hang out with them. I don't like them particularly. I still hang out with the people I was at the soup kitchen with, and the people I'm at the laundromat with. Like, that's who I'm comfortable around, versus the politicians. So anyways, they would still, they're telling me their stories of things that are going on in different parts that they'd be pushed out of. And so I introduced the Homeless Bill of Rights, and we had DeBorah helped a lot with that by testifying, and I thought, oh yeah, we've got unsheltered people coming to share their stories. We've got like a national freaking expert. This is gonna pass. Nah, didn't pass. It failed. There's 7 people on council. It failed 2-5. Just myself and another council member voted for the Bill of Rights. But then some politics happened behind the scenes, and then 2 weeks later, we were able to pass, after the Supreme Court ruling, legislation that decriminalizes being homeless. So now, folks can hang out in the parks, you can hang out where you need to hang out, you can sleep where you need to sleep, and you're not going to get a ticket. So we were able to do that, and hopefully we can build upon that in the next couple of years.
A win is a win. A win is a win, and that helped to push forward what you needed to do. But we'll continue that work as we move on in all of our different communities working on legislation and policy. There are many folks here with lived experience who would love to get involved but don't know where to start. Tell us a little bit about your own personal journey in this work and any tips folks should know as they get started themselves doing advocacy and change work.
Sure, I'll start. So I would say, work with the space that you're in right now. So if right now you're in more of an issue-based space, like maybe you are an abolitionist and you're working with how to get rid of solitary confinement, or whatever your issue is, go hard into that issue. Like, show up to everything that you can show up to within your own ability in terms of time, and really network and get to know those folks that you're surrounded with, because those are going to be, if you were to say run for office, those are going to be your volunteers, and those are going to be your super volunteers. For me, I don't like politics, but yet I recognize the power that it has. You've got, I spent so much of my life showing up to tables and begging and pleading, please listen to us, please listen to us. People show up and they cry and they share all the trauma they've been through. And then you've got this table full of people that either don't give a damn, don't understand, or just want to go home. So we've got to be the people who are at that table saying yay and nay, making the motions, changing the budgets. And the way to do that is use, again, the circle that you're surrounded with, because y'all are here, which means you've got a circle, or you wouldn't be here. So network with them, and then find a group. For me, it was the Working Families Party. It was not the Democratic Party. It was the Working Families Party, because they invest in working class people. And go to a training, learn how to do a phone bank, learn how to canvas, learn how to do all this stuff, so that when you figure out what it is you want to do, school board, city council, commissioner, mayor, governor, whatever it is you figure out, you'll know how to do it. You'll have your team around you. And when I first ran for school board, I was 24 years old. I wasn't in rooms like this, I can tell you that. So if I can do it at 24, anybody in here can, because you already have a leg up on what I had.
Yeah, I think my answer to that question too is I started off with literally just a clipboard and like a sheet, and started knocking on doors in my neighborhood to talk with my neighbors about the increase in rent, about what we can do during the eviction moratorium, and sharing resources. Also, I got involved like in local civic associations within my city, and that really like made me mad, because they were skewed to only homeowners. So there were no renters on these groups, there were no people who were experiencing homelessness that were participating. But I started showing up and building relationships with elected officials, and demanding them to do the things that we needed to see. And like, Bloomington's a small city. Some of these politicians are only elected by 8 votes. Like, someone won their primary election last month with 8 votes. And so I'm able to organize and get my neighbors together who are frustrated about these issues, and to show up. And sometimes that threat of electoral politics can move the elected official in the direction that you need them to go. And if they don't, then you use that to run someone else against that. And so don't be afraid to show up and put pressure on elected officials, and bring people with you.
That's great. So, obviously we're a friendly crowd here. We all know the value of engaging people with experience in the process. But unfortunately, as you both alluded to, we know not all elected leaders share that view. So maybe we'll start with Branden. You obviously interact with elected officials from a lot of different perspectives. But what's one thing that you see elected officials who don't have lived experience or don't engage people with experience just consistently get wrong about homelessness?
It goes to my first point of them only listening to the people who contribute to their political campaigns, only the people who are a part of the status quo and the political system. And so in Dover, which is our state capital, it's controlled by real estate developers, and it's controlled by groups like the Apartment Association and the Realtors, who organize amongst themselves to come out against the Homeless Bill of Rights, to come out against any legislation that's going to support housing justice. And so it's hard. We have made progress by collaborating with the Working Families Party and getting more folks elected to our state legislature, but they just don't listen. They don't want to, they're not interested in allowing the voices of people with lived experience to share their voices. And we saw that in the committee meeting where the Homeless Bill of Rights was being heard in, where only developers were allowed to give public comment, and we had people showed up who were homeless. And I think that's a part of the problem. And we need more movement elected officials. We need more people who are connected to the community and want to actually bring people in with lived experience and make sure that their voices are heard.
I would just, 100% echo all that, because being at the table with some of these folks, the intersectionality of not caring. So I just think of some of my colleagues, and I've said this to their face, so if they end up somehow hearing this, that's fine. not caring about those who are unsheltered, 9 times out of 10, they also are racist. They also are sexist. They're transphobic. They're homophobic. They're all the isms. They tend to be all in this package. Those are the people making the decisions. And I think, like, for me, this isn't political. Like, when you get in these seats, like, what you do is so, they think in such as like these transactional political mindsets. But when you've been there and you know the people who are still there, it ain't political. It's about another human. It's about Sherry. It's about JoJo. It's about Bobby. It's about actual human beings. And it's like a sense of urgency where you honestly, I don't give a damn if I'm accepted by them. And it just doesn't matter. It's so personal. Like even now, like my heart's beating, and it's just like, it's a burning desire inside of you that no matter what developer, no matter who comes at you, you're gonna throw down for your people.
Thank you both so much for bringing to light, the struggles and the wins of doing this work. Like you said, it takes collaboration with the Working People's Party across the country. We do that in Delaware, and also the Poor People's Campaign as well. We work with them as well. But also with the National Coalition for the Homeless, we have a resource for registering people who do not have housing. You don't need a home to vote. It's a campaign. And we talk about policy and legislation, and we need people to register, be registered to vote so that you can vote in the candidates and you can help to vote in the policies that we are looking to create change with. This is going to be our final question, and then we're going to turn to the audience for questions. There are government and nonprofit leaders in the audience today. What is the most impactful way you've seen a government, organization, or institution support the empowerment of people with lived experience to meaningfully participate in the policy-making process?
I would say we have one ally on the Wilmington City Council, Councilmember Shanae Darby, who does a really good job at, before introducing any legislation, coming to the community and to the advocates before putting it out. And she does a really good job at making sure that we have the opportunity to fully participate. She shares memos from the city department that sometimes advocates don't have access to, regular people don't have access to. She can get in trouble for that, but she does it anyways. So we have people who are allies in the government that want to move the needle forward, and I think having people who are willing to really bring people and stay connected to the community and make sure that there's that collaboration between advocates and elected officials is needed.
So I would say, recently, just being in these different sessions here and hearing what other municipalities are doing, because I would say in Allentown, meaningfully participate, I wouldn't say we're doing that, to be honest. I would say right now, things are more performative, things are more, performative. We have a commission on homelessness. We have some spots for those with lived experience, but I don't think we're there yet. So I haven't seen it. It was great to see when we were trying to pass the Homeless Bill of Rights, folks that I knew come in and share their experiences, and it was great to see even nonprofits that don't like each other unite around this one piece of legislation. But in terms of meaningfully participating in the policy-making process, we're not there yet.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out to this event. It's been a monumental occasion where all these look around, all these people around you are all leaders, right? And many of you guys have shared the same calling I have, right? You all have that calling, most of us. I guess my question for you guys is, we're here, all these people, leaders here today. What can we do right now today to make a change? Right now. Well, we're here together, united right now. That's my question.
Great question. One second. What can we do right now? First step. Branden, why do you think so?
Fine. I'm going to say the first step is to go on google.com, and if you don't know who your state representative is and your state senator or your local city council person or county commissioner or whatever the name is of the most local person representing you now in your city, I would do that. And also start to think about ways that you can talk to people who want to show up, not just in a service-based way, but in a way of like really trying to push through advocacy, push through policy changes in your community. It starts with like, you can watch Schoolhouse Rock and learn how a bill passes, or you can, talk with people who have experience of government and start to learn how a bill gets passed. What is a committee? What is a markup? What is an amendment? All of these things that we haven't really, you haven't learned, to start to know that and teach other people who you work with in your community.
You want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say to build on that actually. If you think about the problem you want to solve, add the word legislation to. So if you want to solve sweeps to encampments, add legislation to end sweeps to encampments, and see where in the country is doing the thing that you want to do, and then see if there is an ally. And this could be done, like you're saying today, you can just Google it real quick and see what's being done. And then bring that to a local legislative body or a mayor or whomever and see what their reaction is. You might have an ally on that body, you might not. And then now, that's a whole other ballgame, you gotta get an ally there. But find the piece of legislation, because what happens far too often is I see people come in, they'll identify the problem, but then they don't have the solution, and so the legislative body that I'm on just shuts them out. It's just like, okay, another problem, we know that. Okay, that's different than to say, hey, here's the problem, and in Minneapolis, they did this to solve this problem, and I want to do this thing.
Great. Next question.
If I could just continue this real quick. So I had a thought last night, right? Like, today we're all here. If we had like, not a protest, but a call to action today with everyone here, all these leaders here, right? Let's say let's just suppose we all went out in the intersection right now, okay, to get media attention, and not in anger, but in unity, driven by love for our community and the belief that we can and must do better. Each overdose death is a failure of our system. A life lost due to neglecting misguided policies. We carry this mission from God with compassion and justice. And that's the type of, what can we do today? Would something like that work? I'm just saying, to get the message out to people. And because the canopy bans are all local. The jurisdiction, we don't need any policy changes. We just need them to not criminalize it. You know what I'm saying? They don't need it. It's not a demand to criminalize people. They're doing it just because they want it.
Hi, I guess I also want to go what he's saying. What if you don't believe in electoral politics? Because it's failed us. Even the situation that we're in right now. For trans people, there has been so many fights that we've had to do to fight for trans rights, and then now Trump's going to be in the office and take all of those rights away. So I feel like electoral politics, it takes too long. It's extremely corrupt. There's so many nonprofits and business owners that pay these politicians off. I personally don't care to try to connect with any city council member that is corrupted, or our mayors. I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm sure a lot of people from LA can tell you how corrupt our systems are. So for pushing the needle without the electoral politics, what do we do? Because then you have the other aspect of, if we protest, then people start being like, oh, like those people are just interrupting, they're disrupting, then you get kind of put this other label, when the reality is electoral politics are not going to save us, and we're not going to push the needle forward fast enough going to talk to the legislators.
That's a good question. I guess I'll say electoral politics is only one way, to accomplish the goals that we all want to see at the local level, state level, national level. And so really to step into issue-based organizing and issue-based advocacy work, I think would be like a really good next step for you in your city. Start to build coalitions with people that maybe are already doing some of that work of like grassroots advocacy, knocking on doors, lobbying legislators, and meeting people where they are and try to like build consensus amongst people who are not at the table to participate. And also you can use the energy that you're building outside of an election season to get people prepared for the next one. And so if you're able to make your community informed how City Council member Smith is voting on their local homeless Bill of Rights, and you make that the issue of the election year, then you can go back to their constituents and say, Councilmember Smith didn't vote this way, make sure we vote for the other candidate. And so I think making sure you step into that work of like building community and organizing with folks and still using tactics like rallies and letter campaigns and showing up and sitting in, doing things like that is important, even outside of an election year.
The electoral process has failed us. And that's why, again, I will reiterate, we gotta change who we're voting for. If the people that we voted for, now LA is a whole other ball, that's a big behind city. I'm thinking from my perspective, 125,000, it's possible for pretty much anyone who wants to put the work in to get elected, but LA, I don't know the landscape. But what I would say is, if not a city council, there's always, to me, until we change who's in the seats, the corruption will still happen and the electoral process will continue to fail us. But until then, all about a protest. And I disagree. I don't feel like protesting, I feel like protesting is effective. I mean, we're going to be starting a co-response program because of protest. So, I mean, even protesting doesn't always have an immediate response, though. Like, that's taken 3 years. So, unfortunately, from my experience, there is no expediency when it comes to government. There's just not.
I'll just add to that too. Knowing who your targets are is important. So that's why like knowing who it is you're trying to push and who influences them. Who do they listen to? Who has power over how they make their decisions? Is it their constituents? Is it special interests? And how can you leverage those people to like advance your cause? It's hard work, but like maybe thinking through power mapping. How do I get Councilmember Smith to move? Who does she listen to more? Thinking through that aspect of it.
And I'd also like to add to that, what each of you have shared. With the National Coalition for the Homeless, we have a campaign called Bring America Home Now campaign. And we meet monthly via Zoom with constituents and people in advocacy and activists across the country who are asking the same questions that you were asking here today. And so we know that it's a movement that it takes all of us to be a part of, and there you can hear what's happening across the country connected to policy and legislative change, and why we have to be part of the process. If we're going to change this process, we have to be part of it.
Really? So here's Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'm from Washington State, been doing some advocacy at the city council level, boards, commissions, and so on. And the thing that I run into most when I've organized people to come for public comment is they're cutting public comment to 1 minute. It is difficult to make any well thought out argument in 1 minute. You can hardly just name the problem. How do people make sure that we are actually allowed public comment that's meaningful?
If you do have an ally on that committee, that commission, that council, you can make that person can make a motion and then someone else just needs to second it and say, you know, I want so-and-so to be able to continue, extend the time, whatever the motion is. Like maybe I make a motion that Miss Ramsey can continue speaking another 4 minutes. Another way is, so where I'm at, there's language in our charter that a group of residents, if they gather, I believe it's 100 signatures, that, I could be off on the amount of signatures, if they gather a certain number of signatures, that we must put whatever agenda item they want on the agenda. So now we're all forced to talk about whatever it is. That's never happened though. There's also in the charter for ballot initiatives where if it goes beyond just like, hey, I want this on the agenda, if it goes on to, I want the voters of my municipality voting on this, that's even more signatures, but it's possible. Unfortunately, it does put the work on the people, but sometimes that's how these systems are designed. It's how they're designed. But I would say until that, definitely see if someone's willing to make that motion to extend your time, and maybe even beyond that, change the policy. Because right now it's a minute. It can be changed to 5. It can be changed to 3. There's no reason it's 1 minute. So see if someone's willing to change that.
I mean, I'm not a council member, and everyone has different rules in their city, but I would say like also like if you're not able to get it inside your city hall or legislature, take it to the press possibly and give people the opportunity to maybe do like a press conference and have a space to continue those thoughts and share their comments that they would have given, and highlight the fact that they're not giving people who are impacted by their policy a voice in this important, in your legislature.
And sir, in 2020, we give people 3 minutes and then 5 minutes if you're head of an organization. So first off, just make up an organization, say you're the head of it, and boom. Secondly, the people destructed. I was on council back then, and everyone was all up in arms, but I loved it. They were, because it was COVID, they were banging on the windows, they broke some things. But you know what? Once the mask restrictions and everything kind of were relaxed a little bit, first thing we did, we gotta let the public in, we gotta make sure that they, even if they're talking about things that are making us uncomfortable, we gotta make sure that they get their 3 minutes or 5 minutes. So sometimes you might have to make some noise and disrupt and get the police called on you.
I want to just add one last thing to that. I think public comment is an organizing or mobilizing for public comment is a great tactic, but it's not the only thing. I think what you could focus on is organizing your people, organizing your constituency to build relationships with the people that you need to target by district maybe, or in their community so that they can learn how to become more effective advocates in their own right. And like public comment should be that last step that all of the people on that legislative body have heard before they're going to either vote yes or no or abstain.
Hi, thank you. Des Martinez from Fresno, California with We're Not Invisible and CSH. I'm glad to be here and thank you so much. And I love your hair. I've been on her all 3 days. And my question is in my city, in my county, I've been advocating now for about 10 years since I was unhoused on the streets. We've been to city council, I've led marches, protests, sleep outs on city property, on board of supervisor, county property, at the libraries. I take children now to the city hall because they're missing school because they're homeless on our streets. Unfortunately, in my city reps, a couple of them that I did vote for, are allowing other city council members to call me a drug addict, alcoholic. You come here every week and you beg us for money. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars. You're ignorant, go sit down, you're nothing. You won't amount to anything, you're not credible. These are things that hurt us. And when I take in my street family members, because in my county, they're street family. We're not unhoused, we're not homeless. We're street family members. And it actually deters them from going, because when I take them in there and they see the abuse that they put on me, They're too afraid to go up to the mic because, see, we're already experiencing trauma out on the streets. Why do I want to go into City Hall and experience the trauma from the city council leaders that were supposed to be here to protect me? The ones I voted for, the ones I brought to the park to talk to the people about voting for them. In my county, we sign people up on the streets to vote every single time. But yet they go into City Hall and the same person that they voted for is calling them ignorant and a drug addict. Who do we turn to when we fight this? What about when HUD gives us so much money? We're in E7, and that's embarrassing in my county. And I can't find out how to hold accountability on these organizations giving millions and millions of dollars to our cities and counties and not holding accountability to them. For the developers coming in from out of state and buying up our land or our low-income neighborhoods and then turning them out and kicking people out on the streets. Right now, we have hundreds of children. They recognize over 500 children in the school system of homelessness, right? That's only one school district. But what about if they have a sibling and a parent? What do we do when we come to that crossroad that even the people we voted for, the leaders that are supposed to help protect us, they told me that they can't do what we want. Because see, this council member over here in District 6 needs my vote, and I need his vote. So in order for me to go against him, I'm gonna have to not vote on his, and he's not gonna vote on mine. So in my city, I'm experiencing that all 7 of them are up there for themselves. Who do we reach out to when our city fails us, when our county fails us, our assembly members and our senators fail us, and nobody's holding accountability on where this money's going? It's too much money to go out here to not see success happen. My county's received $400 million in 4 years, and we've had a 49% increase in homelessness. I'm not understanding where the third party or who I call to say, come and look, do your audits. We need to hold accountability on the providers and the people that are using this money but not doing the resources that they said. Who do we talk to?
Question, anyone might take it? Branden?
One of the things I think you could do, and everything that you shared is like resonating with me, I think we should shame those people who are doing bad things. Like, don't be afraid to call them out. If you have the resources to print flyers that you can put the face of the elected official on the flyer, put their name, maybe take a screenshot of the roll call vote if your city has that, and put that onto the flyer and go around in their district that they represent. Even going into maybe some of the targeted areas where you know that there's a lot of people who vote because they tend to listen to the, go to their houses. You go to their houses, go on their block with that flyer, collect petitions, and like scare them a little. Let them know that we're putting you on notice. That's what I would do.
Yeah, do all that, and also file an ethics complaint. It might be titled different, but in Allentown we have an ethics commission. And above that, I'm sure there's something at the state level, but just even locally, file an ethics complaint because what they're doing is unethical. Scare them and then double scare them when they get that in their email that there's been an ethics complaint, multiple ethics complaints filed against them, and obviously, get people geared up now to run against them. So then they're not there. And if there's an organization, like a local organization that is able to help you with some of the infrastructure and what it would take to run someone against them, and then also show up. So it's not y'all having to show up all the damn time. Get other people. And then 2020, what they did is they had like this, because we weren't letting folks in, they set up this screen outside, the organization set up a screen outside of City Hall as they were banging on windows and trying to get indoors and stuff. And so they got the press there. So just imagine if you did have, say, 3-4 people go in, know that they're gonna get criticized and disrespected, know that. But you're calling that press conference. the media is there and the media reports on what that elected official is calling residents of the community. Meanwhile, you've got people outside and you're getting them all hyped up. So then now it's not like 5 people who have to face all of this. It's like it's 50. And then even if you are criticized, at least you're amongst family and you know that they've got your back.
You may be someone who's like a leader in your community that like a lot of people point to for the answers to a lot of these problems, and you may feel that pressure, but I think you should like push back into training folks on how you got where you are, how you became the person, like a leader that can show up to City Hall and speak your public narrative and have people listen to you, because eventually they're gonna get tired of you. We already know what she's going to say, but if you have someone new who's never been there, who's ready to fight with you, and they're prepared to share their story and push on their city council, I think that's the most effective way you can give your energy, developing other people.
Thank you. As we come to the close, we want to ask our panelists to share a final thought.
Yeah, I guess my final thought would be is run for something, and I'll say it again and again. Run for something, school board, and if you're not ready to run for something, get involved with the Working Families Party, Make the Road. I don't know if Make the Road's national, but Make the Road, whatever local organization. And if it's not political, I don't know, if you love animals, get involved with the SPCA. Like, go get involved with an organization if that when you decide to make your move, they'll have your back. Again, like I get that electoral politics isn't always the answer, but it sure is one of the answers. And until we are in these rooms making the decisions, ain't nothing gonna change. These systems will still be the systems, and we'll keep getting breadcrumbs.
I think electoral politics too is like the one thing that we could do to try to make change. I think also continuing to show up and do community organizing work with your neighbors, step into building relationships and deep and authentic relationships with people in your communities. We shouldn't just be knocking on doors and making phone calls when it's time for an election. That's work that we should be doing 364 days beyond the election, engaging people. And if we think about who participates in the electoral process, it's so small compared to the number of people that actually live in our communities and that are going through these issues. And so if you're able to engage with those people and build coalitions and get them to start to show up at local city hall meetings, organize to give public comment, look at what other states are doing. Like, I'm going to take what someone brought to me here, which is like a youth homelessness guaranteed income, direct cash transfers program, and try to implement that in my city, right? You can do that. Like, look at what other cities are doing, find an elected official in your area and be like, hey, can you introduce this here? And try to do that there. So that's my takeaway, and I hope you all continue to do the great work of building community and pushing for policy.
Right, let's give our panel a huge round of applause.